First, let me tell you that the Board of Directors of the SAE chapter of Oklahoma University retained me yesterday afternoon to assist them in evaluating certain legal issues and other matters that may impact the local chapter of SAE and its members as a result of a recent incident and action by the University of Oklahoma on that incident. Let me begin by telling you that we are not here because we are interested in a legal solution. We hope, and I hope my statement will make it clear, that we seek to have some other resolution of this matter. I have been retained to represent the chapter and its members where they wish for me to in any matters that may relate to the due process of the students. But our first concern is for their physical safety. Unfortunately, there have been some incidents involving current members of SAE where death threats have been placed, where there have been physical assaults or alterations on the University of Oklahoma campus, and where some of the students who are members have frankly been afraid to go to class, and their parents have expressed their own concern about the well-being of their children. And the SAE Corporation locally shares in that, and we take this opportunity to make those concerns known to the University of Oklahoma, and I'm sure they will respond in an appropriate manner. Secondly, all of us agree that the actions which led to this matter at the University of Oklahoma are inexcusable. Let me be clear. There is no justification for what occurred, zero. The incident, however, occurred on one of 5 buses. Each bus had 55 seats. There are over 100 local members of the SAE chapter, and they were going to the Founders Day banquet at the Oklahoma City Golf and Country Club. Most of the buses had somewhere between 25 to 27 members and their dates. So we're talking about one incident with 9 seconds of video on one of 5 buses. Above all else, the board of the local chapter that I represent is concerned about the physical safety. That's our first concern and paramount concern. Secondly, we are interested, where needed, to act to protect the due process rights, the First Amendment rights, and the 14th Amendment rights of the members. These include those rights for due process and disciplinary hearings, due process before the national SAE chapter, which I might parenthetically say I talked to the General Counsel of SAE today and was assured by reviewing with him the provisions of the SAE national chapter and bylaws that they do afford due process to members of the SAE fraternity who are suspended. We hope that the university will do the same thing, and we extend to them our initial belief that they will do the right thing, but we stand ready to protect the rights of the student members. Finally, as I said at the beginning, this matter is not one that seeks a legal solution. We seek to invite the university and its leadership, President Boren and his designated representatives, and where appropriate, we consider it a good idea to invite representatives of the American Civil Liberties Union in Oklahoma and the state and perhaps Oklahoma City chapters of the NAACP. We believe that working together in a positive manner, we can find a solution that is acceptable to everyone to make this a teachable moment and an educational moment for what is seriously a flawed incident. And we will seek to accomplish that. It was President Boren himself who said in a recent case that the University of Oklahoma believes every student deserves a second chance. We certainly think that's true for the members of the SAE House and perhaps even for the members that are involved in this unfortunate confrontation with the university and the basic values of SAE. Having said that, however, the SAE House at the University of Oklahoma, and in fact the entire Greek system that exists at OU, has time and time again, over multiple decades, almost from the end of the first decade at the University of Oklahoma, been a part of the OU community and contributed to the development of the university and the development of members, both men and women, in the Greek system. So with that history and with that background, we invite the university to work with us and try to find a solution. And I'll ask my assistant, who drove me down here very safely in the rain, to distribute copies of this statement, and I will now try to answer your questions.
So, Mr. Jones, do you represent the two then that were expelled, and do you know if those two students are appealing their expulsion?
First, I do not represent those two young men. Secondly, I'm not sure that expulsion is quite the accurate word to use. My understanding, and I'm subject to revision, is that these two young men withdrew from the university, and they withdrew on Monday morning before President Boren's press conference, I believe, which was on Tuesday.
Mr. Jones, if you are fearing for your life or somebody is concerned about death threats, with all due respect to all attorneys, that is not necessarily the first person that you would call when you're worried about your personal safety. So I guess my question is, why are you here?
I'm here because I represent the board of directors of the local corporation that is the SAE chapter.
But you're a lawyer who's saying you have no interest in suing, is that correct?
No, I didn't say I had no interest in suing. What I said was we are not looking for a legal solution. That's not our first choice. We are looking to resolve this matter in the ways in which I have described.
Which would mean what? Which would mean what?
It depends on what the university and the other organizations that I mentioned, what they may have in mind, and I'm sure that SAE will contribute in a positive direction toward that solution if the opopportunity is presented.
Well, what do they want?
You mentioned about how President Boren painted the entire fraternity with a broad racist brush. There's been some mention of defamation against Boren. I mean, is that anything that you're going to be pursuing as well, or are you seeking maybe an apology from Boren?
I'm not seeking an apology from President Boren. What I'm interested in is looking to the future, not the past.
Are you ruling out the lawsuit?
I'm not ruling out a lawsuit. I'm saying that our preference is to proceed in a non-legal solution, a non-adversarial solution, and a non-litigation solution. If that's not possible, although we act in good faith and present this, then obviously we will have to consider other possibilities.
Does the local chapter plan to appeal the revoking of its charter by the national organization?
I'm not authorized yet to speak to that. We have been in contact, or I've been in contact with the National Association, and I'm sure members of the board of directors have been, but I don't think any decision has been reached on that matter yet. It is under review. And just to be clear, there are a number of issues here that we have to review. I'm new to the case. I haven't been in the case 24 hours. And there's a lot of paperwork that I have to review. But let me just tell you basically those issues. They range from real estate to student safety. There's issues about who owns the house and who owns the property and what will be done with the house and what will be done with the property. And that's a contractual issue involving real estate law, and people are looking at that. Then there is the status of the suspended members and their rights before the national organization. The national organization has a due process system in which it will judge each of these members individually as to determine their status in SAE, particularly when they graduate. Then there's also the issue to be certain that the students who disciplinary actions are sought against are guaranteed and have their due process and other constitutional rights. And then I also mentioned the safety of the students, which is our primary concern at this point. Yes, ma'am. Yes, Ms. Wells.
Can you talk about, you mentioned that they're afraid for their safety. Can you be more specific?
No. No, except I think the appropriate authorities have been alerted about that, but we view it as a potentially volatile situation, and that's why I think we need to avoid a rush to judgment. We need to lower our voices, and we need to take a breath.
What does the
Yes.
Board of Trustees want done with the house? You mentioned that there's some real estate issues about who owns it. Do they want it kept up, or?
I don't think they've come to any final decision. They're waiting on legal advice from their real estate lawyer, and while I practiced law 50 years, I've never thought of myself as a real estate lawyer.
Is the house owned by OU or is it owned by the Board of Trustees?
It's my understanding that the property, that is the real property that the house sits on, is owned by SAE. But the university has some claim to the house. But the exact description of that claim or right, I'm not prepared to speak today because I'm still reviewing with others those
Do you
documents.
think there's a problem that the university have a right to throw those people out of that house?
That's also being reviewed.
The university has said that the two students were expelled, and if that's the case, as they tell us, in your view, does that violate free speech?
Well, I try to avoid being more Catholic than the Pope or more royal than the Queen. How the two young men with their parents and their legal counsel decide to proceed is for them. But I would think an immediate expulsion would run contrary to due process. Now, if they withdrew, then it might be considered they did that voluntarily. If they withdrew under threat of expulsion, that raises another issue. Expulsion and a hearing afterwards is permitted where a genuine emergency exists, such as a threat of violence or already increasing violence. We don't have that here. But at the present time, I'm not prepared to characterize those actions because I think that really needs to be determined by the two young men and their parents.
Have you spoken with attorneys at OU since you've been retained?
I have spoken with Mike Burridge, a distinguished former judge in the federal court in the Eastern District, who advises me that in the event of litigation, he would represent the University of Oklahoma.
Do you think David Warren has gone too far throughout all this?
Well, I don't know everything that President Warren knows, and we've been political opponents in the past, so I don't know that I would characterize it. It does seem to me that maybe it's a little overbroad, and hopefully we'll all reason together.
What was it about this case that made you want to get involved and to allow these members to come to you?
Well, they called me. I didn't call them.
But for you
Mr.
to
Jones,
take-
what do you contend that, I mean, you're here representing SAE. What do you contend that OU did wrong?
Excuse me just a minute. I think you had a question I hadn't answered. What was your question?
I mean, yes, they called you, but for you to say, yes, I do want to help you, what was it about the case that made you want to?
Well, I saw it as a First Amendment case. I thought that the fraternity needed assistance, and I knew some of the board members who called me. And SAE has a distinguished history at OU, and the people that called me, certainly I knew as responsible leaders in the political, business, and governmental organizations of Oklahoma. I knew that Coach Switzer, who had spoken out about SAE, was an honorary member. So all of those factors, they were kind enough to think I could help them, and I accepted their retainer. I'm sorry.
No, I guess my question is pretty simple, I think. What do you think they did wrong? OU?
I think there was a premature rush to judgment.
On what? The kicking them out of the house, the expulsions, on what?
Well, I think all of those, plus perhaps more. the use of racial epithets, either directly or indirectly, the painting of members of a fraternity as, by implication, with a tar brush as bigots or racist. I think, while I understand anger, I sometimes am called in to handle the consequences of anger that perhaps has gone out of control. I think it would have been better to have taken a more measured response. I'm not offering that as criticism. I'm offering that simply. We have a judge in Garfield County, Dennis Laddick, who once told a client of mine when he appeared before him, who was 19, he said, every 19-year-old male is entitled to 5 minutes of foolishness. You've had yours. I don't expect to see you again. I think that might, in these circumstances, have been a good guideline. Yes, sir.
Can you describe how the members feel they've been treated through all this?
I think most of the members are still in a state of shock.
And do you have a time frame for when you would like to have this resolved?
Well, obviously, we would like to see it resolved before the end of the semester.
Have you been given any indication from university officials that further expulsions may be imminent of any other members?
I've not been given any indication of that. However, President Boren has indicated that there are investigations and that other students may face discipline or accusations that would lead to discipline charges. But to my knowledge, no one else has been singled out yet as falling under that. I understand the university is still conducting interviews, trying to talk to as many students as on the buses as possible.
Mr. Jones, isn't your beef really not with OU, but with the brothers of SAE, the national chapter, who said they kicked them off campus, they decommissioned them as a chapter, and when your own brothers aren't standing with you, what expectation do you have that the university should?
Well, I don't have a beef with anyone. I have an expectation that everyone will be reasonable, fair, and will reach the appropriate discipline in this case, if that's appropriate.
So,
Yes, ma'am.
I imagine you looked at the university guidelines for discipline students. Are they outlined with the university guidelines? Have you read through any of that yet?
Well, it would be difficult to say that a university has a right to censor speech, no matter how distasteful, hateful, or inappropriate it is, with some exceptions. I mean, we're all familiar with Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes' statement that there's no right to cry fire in a crowded theater. But all speech, with minor exceptions, is generally protected. So to censure someone or discipline them with nothing more than speech is that's a long way from the cup to the lip. Now, there may be other factors. The university certainly has codes of conduct. Whether any of those trump the First Amendment is yet to be determined. As long ago as 1965, Justice Fortas, speaking in Tinker versus Des Moines Independent School District, said, school children do not lose their First Amendment rights at the schoolhouse gate. Now, that decision has been modified slightly, but the basic thrust of it is still the law of the land.
Do you feel that the university has painted this organization in a certain, I guess what I'm asking is, how would you describe what the fraternity has been described as? Is it a racist organization?
My own
people seem to say it is.
My own brother-in-law has been an SAE member for over 40 years. I don't think he's a racist. I don't think Barry Switzer is a racist. The men that I know that are now alumni that were members of the organization are not racist. So I don't think that's a fair characterization of SAE, or for that matter, any fraternity or sorority at the University of Oklahoma.
there any difference here? Because the accusations for the past couple of days have been most of the alum probably were in a very different organization than the organization that exists now or that has existed for the past few years.
Well, I'm familiar generally with that accusation, but I don't have any knowledge of that. And I mean, all of us change. I mean, I'm 75 years old, and I'm certainly not the same person I was 60 some odd years ago at the University of Oklahoma campus. But I doubt seriously that the history of SAE is such that there is such a major generational difference between the present members and the alumni. Now, certainly, there may be individual members, either in the alumni or members that's an exception, but I don't think it's generally true.
You said you're seeking resolution would be your preference. Can you be just a little more specific? Do you want all these members brought back to campus? You want this house reopened? You say you're not interested in an apology from the president. What specifics? You've had a little bit of time to think about it, but when you're seeking resolution, what sort of specifics would you be asking for?
I don't have a specific shopping list or Christmas list or bucket list. I think first you have a dialogue. I don't suggest such a meeting with a preset agenda or conditions for the meeting. So I think that anything is on the table.
There have been suggestions by some that members of the fraternity are victims of a double standard in that they committed hateful speech, yet some people have committed acts of violence, and for their speech, which you said may come under free speech, has resulted in their punishment, while lesser punishments, it's claimed, has come to people who have been guilty of physical violence. Is that a valid complaint?
I don't know about all the cases that might fall into that. I've been involved in a few disciplinary actions at the university. The clients that I represent in those disciplinary actions were fairly treated. I thought the disposition was appropriate in the individual cases. And I think basically each case has to be judged like each tub sits on its own bottom. So to make a generalized analogy from this case or that case, this person is treated fairly, this person is not, I'm not prepared to make that accusation now. Now, President Bourne was angry. I mean, that's clear. I'm not here to say that he wasn't appropriately angry. He has to judge the facts and the evidence brought before him, and he has to act sometimes quickly, sometimes decisively, to protect the legitimate interests of the university. I found him to be a fair man, and I think in this case, if we apply ourselves, we can reach a solution. But I don't think that my client should appear in sackcloth and ashes. I think that's an overreach.
Are you all prepared to go to court and fight this? If it goes to that point?
The last thing I like to do is go to court. I know some of you don't believe it, but it's true.
Mr. Jones, before you were retained, the board of directors put out a statement for the local chapter calling, sort of a strange statement, but saying there was a horrific cancer that invaded this chapter 3 to 4 years ago. What's your understanding of what that means? And isn't that an admission that there was a serious problem here and therefore something had to be done?
Well, I assume they were not speaking in the medical term. So they had something in mind, but I've not discussed with them what they had in mind. But if that's true, and it is relevant to this matter, I have no doubt the chapter will address it. And probably I may be involved in that process.
Who make up the board of directors? Who are these people that called and asked for your legal help?
Sure. Alumni. There may be some students on the board, but the people that I've spoken with are graduates of the University of Oklahoma, and they're alumni, and they're officers of the corporation.
Were you in that fraternity when you were W?
And I was not.
So if Stephen Jones was running the investigation, what would have happened to these boys?
Stephen Jones doesn't have enough facts to make judgment on that, and I don't represent them.
Do you think it's possible that when you get more facts, what the actions Warren took were the correct actions?
I don't know that I can answer a hypothetical question like that, because the truth of the matter is I don't know everything he knew, and he probably doesn't know everything I know. That's why I think we should talk.